Hello everybody, this is TipTop MTG here today with another Magic the Gathering Arena video. In today's video, I am going to be talking about MTG Arena and how to build a Radha Brawl deck. So, for those of you who don't know, Radha was a new legendary creature added with Core Set 2021, and in this second installment in this new series, I'm going to be breaking down what cards work really well with Radha and kind of what you want to do with her as a commander of a Brawl deck. I think that Brawl is really awesome, and a major part of that fun is choosing a commander and building around it. It's a singleton format, which means that you need to choose a bunch of cards for the deck. Normally, I show a deck that I built and show you some gameplay. However, in the spirit of Brawl, I think it'll work better if I start with the commander, tell you what works well with it, and then give you my list as an example. That way, you can use my exact deck if you want, or you can just use my suggestions and build a deck that fits you better. Before we can talk about what cards work well with Radha, I have to go over what she does. Radha, Heart of Keld, is a 3-cost red and green legendary creature elf warrior. She says, as long as it's your turn, Radha has first strike, and you may look at the top card of your library at any time, and you may play lands from the top of your library. She also says, pay 4 red green, and Radha gets +X until end of turn, where X is the number of lands you control. Overall, this commander has a clear theme of just dumping lands onto the battlefield and trying to win with a Voltron-esque, way of hitting your opponent with one really big creature. While this commander is pretty straightforward, there are a ton of different cards that could go in the deck and different ways you could take it. For instance, Radha could be the commander of a Gruul Elf aggro deck, or a deck that cares about what cards on top of your library. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to be talking about building Radha as a Gruul Land Matter Voltron deck, as it really has the most support within Standard. If you were to move out and maybe make this a commander deck, you could totally build this as a, the top card of my deck matters, and then you could always know what's on top. So, there are different ways you could build this, but generally this is probably the best way. So, what cards should you put in your deck? There are a lot of good cards for the deck, and so to make it easier to break down, I put them into different categories. First, let's talk about cards that help you get more lands onto the battlefield. So there are a couple effects that let you play extra lands each turn. Now, in Standard, there's a lot of ramp, and a lot of it is land-based, but a lot of it's also in Simic. Cards like Uro and Growth Spiral are really great, but unfortunately, they don't fit in a Radha deck. What does fit in a Radha deck is things like Azusa Lost But Seeking, which lets you play 2 additional lands in each of your turns. Now, this would be really devastating in something like Standard, but it's very rare that you have 3 lands in your hand, so oftentimes this just doesn't have enough value. But with Radha's ability to always let you look at the top card of your library and play lands from it, it means that if there are 3 lands on top of your library, you can just throw them all onto the battlefield, which, if you're playing lands from the top of your library, is almost like drawing cards, because you're getting them out of the way to draw the cards that you actually want. Also, we have something like Dryad of the Ilsengrove, which does provide mana fixing, which really isn't that important in a 2-color deck, but it also lets us play an additional land each turn. So, if you have Azusa and Dryad of the Ilsengrove, you can play 4 lands per turn, which you probably aren't going to be doing, but it gives you the option to do so. Similarly, we have a card like Escape to the Wilds, which, unlike the Dryad of the Ilsengrove and Azusa, is only a one-time effect, but it is kind of like a card draw spell mixed with a let you play extra lands. And then we have something like Arboreal Grazer, which is a one-time put a land from your hand into the battlefield effect. Generally, that's actually it for playing extra lands each turn, but that does not mean it's the only way to get more lands. So there are cards like Nissa's Triumph and Cultivate, which allow you to tutor through your library to either get lands to your hand or get lands straight on the battlefield. Similar cards involve Migration Route, Circuitous Route, and Migratory Greathorn. All of these are really awesome cards that you pay mana and you tutor lands directly from your library onto the battlefield, which obviously lets you ramp, but it also makes it more likely that you're going to draw a non-land, which is pretty fun. Next, we also have cards like Once Upon a Time, which isn't exactly a tutor, but it will almost guaranteed get you a land, and if you don't like what card's on top of your library, because you can see it, you cast it. Honestly, this probably goes in most green Brawl decks. Next, we have Nylea's Intervention, which lets you tutor for a bunch of lands, which, in combination with Azusa and Dryad of the Ilsengrove, let you just throw them on the battlefield, and, getting as many lands as you can is a good thing. Nylea's Intervention normally isn't that good of a card because they're just going to your hand. You're not actually ramping, but in combination with a lot of the other cards in the deck, it can actually ramp you. We also have Solemn Simulacrum, which is just 4 cost artifact. It's new from it's a new card from M21, or not new, but a new into standard card from M21 that can just tutor a land right when it enters the battlefield. There are better options, but it's also not awful. We have Fertilid, which again lets you tutor for lands, Omen of the Hunt, which again lets you tutor for land, and Beanstalk Giant, which both lets you tutor for a land and put it straight on the battlefield, and it's also a big creature later on that you can cast with all your mana. So that's one of the cards I highly recommend, because yes, you want to ramp a bunch and you want to win with Radha, but you're also generating a ton of mana, so you're probably going to want big spells in your deck as well as a secondary win con, because they could just constantly kill or counterspell your commander or gain control of it, and if that's your only win con, you're probably not going to win. But speaking of winning with Radha, here are some cards that help you get the kill or help you gain advantage from Radha's 6 cost ability. Now, generally I would say this is the least powerful of the abilities, but the way I built my deck, it is the way I win. For instance, Shadow Spear not only makes it so, you can pay 6, you're going to gain a ton of life, but it also gives her trample, which means that they can't just chump block her, which is one of the biggest issues, is that she's a first striker that has a ton of power. They probably have to chump block, and so they're going to keep doing that because they're not going to get hit for 15. But, Shadow Spear makes it so not only are you going to gain a bunch of life, but it also has trample, which means they're probably just going to let it through, because why chump block? And so that's a really awesome card. We have Footfall Crater, which can give Radha both haste and trample. We have Embercleave, which is just devastating. They could think, oh, I'm only taking 10 damage, but then for 2 mana, you flash in an Embercleave, or, obviously you'd have to be attacking with other creatures, but you just flash in an Embercleave and they're dead. Not only does this give her permanent trample, but also double strike, which basically doubles her 6 cost ability. We have Street Riot, just another card that boosts attacking and, gives trample. We have Garruk's Uprising. This one, it doesn't have a lot of synergy with the deck. I mean, if you're playing this as more of a, I'm going to play lots of big green creatures, yes, this card would work really well, but the most important part of this card is that it gives things trample. We have Cetizen Training, not an awful card. We have, it can draw you a card and give things trample and it boosts power, but I prefer something like Garruk's Uprising that just gives all your stuff trample. We have Vivian Arcbow Ranger, which can boost Radha by giving her counters and give her trample. While it isn't a permanent effect, it is pretty good, and it also lets you use her as a removal spell, and we'll talk about that more when we get into the removal spell section. We have cards like Fling, which, this is moving away from getting trample, because all those other cards were just pretty much trample and maybe 1 double strike. Fling just lets you sacrifice Radha for 2 mana and basically throw her at your opponent, so it's nice if they're going to, for instance, gain control of your commander, which is a common thing that happens, or maybe you swing for 15, they don't block, you hit them, and then you fling and, her at them for another 15 damage. It's kind of like a double strike, but you really only want to use it as a last case, like removal spell, or as a, just, oh, I'm going to win the game from this. We have Unleashed Fury and Uncaged Fury, both kind of double their power. One of them gives +1/+1 and double strike, and one of them just doubles the power. Again, good cards when you're trying to get, Radha up to 12 power. Now she's at 24, and she has first strike, which isn't super important, but it does dodge things like Death Touch, which is a lot of the time a big, downfall to decks that just want one really big creature. Because she has first strike, she kind of dodges Death Touch. We have Raking Claws, which also just gives double strike. We have Gravitic Punch, which basically is kind of like Fling, but it costs more, can only hit players, but it doesn't sacrifice the creature. You're just going to pay for, and target creature you control deals damage to target player equal to its power, and it has Jumpstart, so if you can manage to pay 4 plus or 6, so you need 10 mana to do this, you can boost her, make her deal damage, and then the next turn do it again. And if you have 14 mana, you can do that both in one turn, which is kind of insane. But also, just a thing to note, you can activate Radha's ability multiple times. So if you have a Nissa on the battlefield and you have 27 mana, there's a high chance you'll be able to activate Radha's ability 3 times. And when you do that, she's just going to become huge. Then we have things like Torbrand, which doesn't necessarily help her in that much, but because she, doesn't help her that much, but because she has first strike, it works really well, and you do run a lot of effects that just deal damage, and there are a lot of fight spells, so I think it works well within the deck. And then we have Fiery Emancipation, which is just amazing. It triples her damage, and because she's going to have a high damage number, this gets really crazy really fast. Even if she's not boosted, she's going to be dealing 9 damage. So if you can play this, there's almost, if they can't remove it, there's a high chance that they're going to die, and it just works well in any deck that wants to win by dealing damage. Next, we have good spells that you should cast with a lot of mana. We have things like N-Raise Forerunners, which can help Radha get through with damage, although it's a very low chance you'll be able to cast N-Raise Forerunners and boost Radha. There's things like Voracious Hydra, which can be a removal spell. It can also be a huge creature. We have Ugin the Spirit Dragon, which I think is probably the biggest one you're going to want to put in here. It is removal on a plus. It is board wipe. And if you can get to its ultimate, you can basically, it's not even just basically win the game. It's, you are playing lots of big things, so there's a chance you just win the game there. It's just pretty good. Nyx Bloom Ancient will make sure that you always have the mana for what you need. The Great Henge is a source of card draw. It also can boost Radha to be 4 power, and it also gains you life. It also ramps you a little bit, so I just really like it. It also works well with the fact that, maybe it costs 8 mana to act or to cast, but you can then activate Radha's ability for 6, and then, she's going to get boosted, and that makes Great Henge cheaper. Even if it's just for a turn, it makes it easier to cast, so I like that. We have Finality of Devastation, which can let you go tutor out that perfect card at the perfect moment, or just give all your stuff trample and +X+X. And then we have Stonecoil Serpent, which just is a nice X Hydra, basically, but it's actually a serpent. So yeah, just pretty good cards that you can cast with lots of mana. For removal, we have basic things like Shock, Scorching Dragonfire, Slaying Fire, things that are a little less specific. Vivian Arcbow Ranger works wonderfully because she can put counters on things, she can give things trample, and she also works as removal. We have Domri's Ambush, which can boost up your commander and also just fight, just a good card in Gruul. So just general red removal, maybe some green fight spells, but that's pretty much what you're going to want. In terms of drawing cards, we're going to want cards like Return of the Wild Speaker, which will allow you to draw cards based on the power of your creatures. So if you can cast that on the same turn you can play Radha, that's going to draw you a ton of cards. It can also just boost Radha and any other things. So that's pretty good. Great Henge is another source of draw, and so is Garut's Uprising. We talked about both those. But then you're just going to kind of want generic green draw, whenever you cast a creature, draw a card, all that kind of stuff. So, pretty good. And then other cards you're going to want cards like Nissa, who are just going to, first off, weaponize your lands, because you're going to have a lot of them, but it's also going to increase the amount of mana you have access to, which is always useful. Now, you can build your deck however you want, but these are just some cards that I think have a decent amount of synergy with the commander. Of course, add any red or green card you like. Add more removal, add Arcane Signet. Also, if I missed any awesome cards with awesome synergies, please let me know in the comments down below. I tried to look at all of Standard. Obviously, this isn't for Historic Brawl. If you want to see Historic Brawl guides, let me know, but, I try to look at everything, and these seemed like the cards that worked the best with Radha. Anyway, moving on, if you want to see my deck list, it is in the description down below. Check that out. Of course, it's just a recommendation. If you just want to copy mine, I've actually had a decent amount of success with it. Unlike Vito, who I used last time, Radha has a decent amount of support. Ramp is a pretty big thing in Standard right now, and there are a lot of really good things to ramp into. Some games I just win by hitting them with Radha. Some games I win by getting out Ugin, and when you play Ugin, you basically win the game. And so there are just a lot of really fun things you can do with the deck. If you guys decide to build a Radha deck, let me know how it goes in the comments down below. And yeah, also pretty exciting. Permanent Brawl queue is now open. It's been open for a little bit now, but yeah, just check out Brawl. It's really fun. If you guys enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.